Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast with your hosts Griffin Palmer, CJ Hickman, Jason Cabrera, and Ryan Mitchell.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is Friday, May 18th. This is the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast, the official podcast of thefantasyfootballfanatics.com. I'm your host, Griffin Palmer, joined by, again, the one and only Jason Cabrera. Jason, what is up, my friend?
What is up, man? I'm doing all right. How are you?
I cannot complain. It has been, well, I guess I could complain. I don't know what the weather's like out there in the desert in Arizona, but over here on the East Coast, it has been just a rainy, yuck mess for like the last week almost. It's just gross. So I guess I can complain about that.
I would take that.
You would take it?
That. It's like 100 some odd degrees out here. It's hotter than just balls. It's bad. It's really, really bad right now.
See, I was going to make a grass is always greener type approach, but I don't think there's much grass in Arizona, is there?
There's no grass.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the rocks are always sharper. That's
shinier.
what you say in Arizona.
They're
shinier rocks.
They're more coarse. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know those you might be a redneck jokes. We've got you might be Arizonan jokes, and it's like if you like crushed rock in your front yard. There you go.
You might be from Arizona.
You might be from Arizona.
Oh, jeez. What is wrong with the world? As we were just talking about that Yanni Laurel thing. It's where do these things come from? Yeah, that's the dumbest thing in the world. We're not even going to talk about it. It's so dumb. But anyway, we have an amazing show for you guys today. Today we're going to be talking, of course, our post-draft, mock draft recap and review. So if you guys did not listen to Tuesday's show, I highly recommend you hit pause right now. Don't stop. Don't delete. Hit pause. Go back. Listen to Tuesday's show. Tuesday, Jason and I did a 2-team mock draft, and we gave you our live thoughts as we went. We both drafted individual teams. Interestingly enough, it's going to be fun to talk about because we are on different ends of the snake draft. So there was nothing in the middle. We both were close to a double pick than long runs. So our teams are pretty, I'm not going to say decisive. That's not the right word, but it's very telling for what happens if you're in position at the end of a draft right now and what your options are. So we're going to get into it. It was eye-opening, especially seeing where some of these rookies go, which, again, we're going to talk about. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to recap that draft. We've had a couple days to break it down, review it, and we're going to tell you what we think. As always, if you guys enjoy the show, make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Podcast Addict, comments, submissions, questions, whatever the case may be. You can send them all in through various social media sources. Really just look for The Fantasy Football Fanatics wherever you listen to audio. If you're on YouTube, any social media, you'll probably find us. And we're going to start with a warm-up question that comes in from Twitter. This one comes in from Mike from Dallas. So what's up, Mike? We know a Mike that's a Dallas fan, though he's not from Dallas, is he? I don't remember. Anyway.
Probably not him.
Probably not him.
He never picks up his phone. It can't be him.
Yeah, no, we never get a hold of that guy. But friend of the show, ex-member of our League of Record. Anywho, Mike asks, who do you think was a bigger bust last season? David Johnson or Jay Ajayi? Now,
come on. That's not he got injured. Come on now.
See, this is the thing. Your gut immediately tells you, well, David Johnson, he was the number 1 overall pick. But a key detail that I want to point out, which is why I was like, this might actually be a really good question. You have to think of it like this. Jay Ajayi was also a number 1 pick. He was a number 1 running back. He was the 7th running back off the board at the back of the first. The difference between David Johnson and Jay Ajayi is Jay Ajayi was always around. You never knew when to start, when to play him. And when it was all said and done, he didn't even finish as a running back, too. He finished as a flex option running back. So in a lot of ways, he burned that roster spot, unlike David Johnson, which when he got hurt, a lot of people dropped him, or because he was injured, you could put him on a reserve spot if your league has it. So in a lot of ways, yes, you invested more draft capital in David Johnson. That's undeniable. But to me, you could make an argument that was Jay Ajayi because he just burned a roster spot, burned starting positions. He gave you bad performances more often than he did and changed teams, had to start over, learn new offense, never really got going to the expectations. I mean, I was very high on him last year as we go back and check our rankings. But, I mean, clearly under-delivered across the board. And you had to hold on to this guy and probably had to bench him because you just never knew when you could trust him. So I'm interested. That was kind of my thought on it, which is why I thought this was actually a debatable question. So I want to know what your thoughts are, Jason.
I guess I just have a different view on the word bust, because when you say bust, to me it means someone that underperformed. And David Johnson didn't underperform. He didn't perform at all. He got injured. So he was out all season. Ajayi was around all season. He had 2 different teams. So he had the opportunity to play for you. And like you said, if you were smart and David Johnson got injured, you either dropped him or you put him on injured reserve, and it wasn't that big of a deal. You went out and got another guy. But with Jay Ajayi, I know people that started him a lot, and they would always go, oh, God, I started him, and it just didn't work out. He's not giving me any points. And that, to me, seems like a bigger bust because you put him in, and he costs you points. Whereas with David Johnson, you drop David Johnson, you go get Kenyon Drake. That's exactly what happened to me last year. I dropped David Johnson. I went out and I got Kenyon Drake, and he actually performed well for me, and I was okay. He didn't cost me anything because I just dropped him.
Yeah, no, I completely agree because there are plenty of guys that were streamable, and obviously if you follow the show, we were giving you waiver wire additions and ad drops and starts and sits the whole way. I mean, it was streamable, but I just think it's an interesting debate because, again, your view on bust is underperforming, which I would agree, but I think that in the context of draft value is where this kind of comes from. And it's hard to debate. When you're the number 1 overall pick in a snake draft, you don't pick again until 24. So basically, all the best players are gone by your second pick, and that second pick is basically your top starter now. So it could go either way. I lean Jay Ajayi for all the reasons we stated, but I mean, really, it's a matter of perception. David Johnson obviously really burned your team, and especially them not bringing him back later in the season because the playoffs were out of reach. So I vote Jay Ajayi here, but you could go either way.
I would too, but I understand what you're saying. You do have a point because, like I said, it did happen to me. I had David Johnson on my team, and it was like,
Yeah, or in an auction league, and you burned well over a quarter of your auction value to get this guy, most likely, and that really cripples your team in an auction draft. So these things do happen. All right, let's move on to some of our top headlines from around the league, and we'll start with a league-wide headline, which when I first read this, I was like, oh, and I was like, wait, this might actually be interesting. The Cleveland Browns have been announced as being the team that will be featured on this season of Hard Knocks.
I'm actually kind of happy about this because this is the perfect storm team. This is a team coming off of a losing season,
a winless
season.
There you go.
And the season before wasn't much better.
Nope.
I mean, they're coming off of 2 crap seasons. They are coming off of getting tons of draft picks, including 2 number 1 draft picks in the last 2 years. And now they've got 2 number 1 quarterbacks. I think we got to figure out who's going to start. So this is going to I think this is going to be a little bit entertaining.
See, I agree, because when I first saw it, I was like, oh, that's not a good pick. That was clearly just bottom of the barrel, and that's your kind of gut reaction when you see the Cleveland Browns being featured on anything. And then when you stop to think about it, like you were just talking about, this has been one of the most intriguing teams to follow this entire offseason. So, I mean, I am actually really kind of excited to see how this plays out because, I mean, the wide receiver position, young talent, coaches changing, defensive talent being brought in across the board. Of course, drafting a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick. So, obviously, drama there with Baker Mayfield. So, I'm very actually intrigued to watch this. I think that it should be fun to watch.
Yep.
But as you kind of brought up, a team that has not won a game they won 1 game in the last 2 seasons, was it? So,
something like that.
I think that's why you kind of gut react. I accidentally played some CJ audio there. CJ singing the intro. Whoops, hand slipped. But yeah.
And that's what CJ thinks about that.
That's what CJ thinks. So that'll be funny because he'll probably never even hear that because he won't listen back. Anyway, let's move on. Cleveland Browns, I will watch this. There have been teams in the past where I was like, I don't think I'm going to – I mean, I'll watch it for the show because it's kind of my job to watch it, but I wasn't excited. I'm actually kind of excited to watch this play out. I think it'll be good drama. Let's go to the running back position where, speaking on Monday Morning Football, Arizona Cardinals running back David Johnson, we just finished talking about him, said that it is still his goal to, quote, have 1,000 rushing yards and 1,000 receiving yards, end quote. So that's obviously in the season, one single go. I mean, that's exciting. We all think he has it in him, and obviously offensive line and weapons around him will kind of dictate how easy this will be for him, but I still think he can do it. What are your thoughts, Homer there over there, Cardinals fan, Jason?
Oh, I think he can do it. I mean, he almost did it 2 years ago, and he almost did it with a backup quarterback, And he's got now a Sam Bradford who is going to be more likely to throw shorter routes, not as long. He'll be looking for guys like David Johnson across the flat. I definitely think he could do it this year.
I would agree. I'm pretty excited to see how it plays out. I was trying to find that the thing my friend sent me was like there have been 3 Star Wars movies and only 1 Cleveland Browns win in that time frame. Anyway, moving on. I don't want to pile on, but it just popped in my head. I was trying to see exactly what it was. Or was it since the last Cleveland Browns win? I don't know. That's why I wanted to find it. Anyway, moving on.
Something like that.
Yeah. In wide receiver news, the Chicago Bears head coach Matt Nagy said that wide receiver Allen Robinson is, quote, ahead of the game, end quote, in his rehab. Of course, coming back from that ACL injury, that's exciting news. We all expected him to be ready because he went down week 1, so he's had a long time to recover.
Yep. Best game of his life.
I doubt that, but I'm sure we'll hear some narratives to that point. I mean, look, we've seen people turn around getting hurt right at the end of the season, be ready to start at the beginning of the year. Obviously, they're not 100%. It takes them a whole season or so to get back to seeming like they are 100%. Allen Robinson, it was the best possible scenario, short of getting hurt in training camp, and I think he's going to be the target monster that he has been throughout his career, and we've seen when he gets fed the ball a lot, he makes plays, and I think you could argue that he's got more weapons around him that they can't just focus on him anymore. So maybe, just maybe, he won't have to face those double, triple coverages that he's struggled with in his young career. So, I look, as we all know in the show, I'm a big Allen Robinson fan. I was the one that was tooting the horn on him back before his big breakout season. I took him to a championship a couple years ago. I love Allen Robinson. I think that even with the uncertainty around the Bears, I think there's a good chance that he's able to go out there and put up some solid wide receiver numbers, even coming off an injury. So I'm really liking Allen Robinson. Of course, I'm excited to see training camp. But in the meantime, I like this news. What's your thought, Jason?
Well, I mean, I drafted Allen Robinson in our mock draft, so
That's
you know
true.
I like Allen Robinson. I really am intrigued by this Bears team this year because, like you said, they've now got a lot more weapons than they've had in a very long time. They've got a young quarterback that could flourish in this kind of a situation in Trubisky. And Jordan Howard could be a big recipient here this year because you got Allen Robinson. You cannot stack the box. You just can't. Not with Allen Robinson out there on the outside. Not with all these weapons that the Bears have brought in. So I think this is going to be a much more balanced offense than what it's been, which is going to be really good for Robinson's numbers. I
mean, obviously, we all like, as a pure runner, Jordan Howard, very talented. Tariq Cohen can catch the ball, which he's been getting some pretty rave reviews from Matt Nagy as well. He seems like he really likes Tariq Cohen. But the wide receiver depth, I mean, Trey Burton at tight end, that's going to draw coverage. Deion Sims to an extent. But at wide receiver, Kevin White, who hopefully will be something, Taylor Gabriel, second-round pick, Anthony Miller. Yep. I mean, the list goes on. They've got plenty of guys who have upside all around him. So I think that he's in a good position, provided that Mitchell Trubisky can kind of take a step. I mean, I'll put it this way. Mitchell Trubisky, even if he has a so-so season, I think that puts him around on par with Blake Bortles. So, heck, I'll take it.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Oh, wait, last bit of wide receiver news. Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator Todd Monken? I'm so bad at this name.
You got me, man.
Monken, I believe is his name. Comment down below if I said that incorrectly. He said that second-year wide receiver Chris Godwin has earned the right to start. Yes. Chris Godwin, who I had as one of my top 3 wide receivers in last year's draft class. Of course, he ended up going considerably later than that. I think he's in a position to be very productive. I think that the concern here, of course, is that he's not going to jump ahead of Mike Evans. He's probably not going to supplant Deshaun Jackson. So it's going to be for the third wide receiver / slot role with Adam Humphries. They drafted a 5th-round wide receiver in Justin Watson this year. I'm not worried about that. Chris Godwin, a 3rd-round pick, I saw people who had him listed as potentially a number 1 pick in last year's draft. Obviously slipped to the 3rd, which blew my mind. I really like him. A lot of analysts that focus on wide receivers really like him. I know Matt Harmon with his reception perception really, really liked him. So I just want this guy to get the chance. He's not a guy you're going to invest really any draft capital in because as of right now, we just don't know. But, I mean, they've upgraded the offensive line. That's going to keep Jameis Winston hopefully upright. Maybe Ronald Jones gets going, establishes the run game. The pass game gets going. They're not going to cover him because they're going to be focused on not letting them get beat by Deshaun Jackson. Mike Evans is going to draw double coverage. Could be a sneaky streaming option and maybe a late-round flyer in Chris Godwin, a guy that I really, really like. What's your thought, Jason?
You know, I agree with you about Chris Godwin. I think he could definitely be somebody to keep your eye on for sure. I mean, someone to grab off the waiver wire and stash because to be honest with you, I think he could beat out DeSean Jackson for that job. I mean, he is very big. He's very fast. He is a good receiver, great hands. I really honestly think he could really challenge for some touches. And if you get him in the waiver wire and he ends up being the number 2 guy in this offense, you're going to look like a genius.
I mean, they might rotate him in this year. DeSean Jackson, they have an out in his contract after this year. So this year, he has a cap hit of $11 million, dead cap of $7.5. Next year, he has a cap hit of $10 million with 0 dead cap.
Yep.
So odds are DeSean Jackson won't be there next year, and hey, maybe he will shine, and we'll be talking about him as being this this guy who's probably going to be a mid-round value in next year's draft. But this year, you could be sneaky. You could be like I was with Allen Robinson, just kind of sneaking in and getting him at a crazy value. Maybe he explodes if there's an injury in front of him. He's a guy to watch.
If you have a keeper league, yeah, I'd grab Chris Godwin.
Keeper,
sure.
Definitely dynasty. He should be rostered if you're in a dynasty league. If you're in a dynasty league and he's out there, go pick him up, please.
Get him.
I think he will be the number 2 behind Mike Evans within a year's time. So, I like it. Moving on. That's really it for the news, though. So I guess with that, let's move on to why we're all here. And drum roll, our post-draft mock draft recap and review. Again, going back to Tuesday's show. Now, we jotted down a couple hot takes. I'm sure we've got plenty of other things we can talk about here. But let's just kind of go back and forth here, I think. And, of course, one thing we have to talk about, and it was worth talking about when it happened, but this was a live draft, so we couldn't stop and talk about it. The number 1 overall pick in this mock draft, Ezekiel Elliott. Wow. I have not seen Ezekiel Elliott ranked as the number 1 running back on anyone's listings. I've seen Alvin Kamara ranked number 1 more often than I've seen Ezekiel Elliott ranked number 2. So, this is weird to me.
Mike from Dallas?
Mike from Dallas drafting with us? Maybe.
Were you drafting with us, Mike?
Look, I really like Ezekiel Elliott. I think that this offense, as we talked about in great length to this point, this offense is more or less going to go through him. He's going to be, I think, a locked and loaded 300-touch running back. He's going to be involved in the passing game more. I think universally this guy is going to see volume. But their offensive line has taken some losses over the years. The defense is a big question mark. I don't know if they're going to be in enough games to really be running the ball as much as they like unless Dak Prescott really takes that next step with Dez Bryant being gone. Does Michael Gallup take that step, and Allen Hurns and Terrence Williams, all guys that have big questions. Tavon Austin, like who's going to step up and really make this offense work besides Ezekiel Elliott, who's just going to face stacked boxes. So I don't know. We all like him, and as I said, I have my big 3. For me, it is Todd Gurley, it is David Johnson, it is Le'Veon Bell, in no particular order. I mean, I have an order, but for the contents of what I'm saying right here, those are the 3. Then I have Ezekiel Elliott kind of as a slot, kind of right in his zone. He's a sub-tier of the number 1s before we start getting to the Alvin Kamaras, the Kareem Hunts, the Melvin Gordons, the Leonard Fournettes, the Dalvin Cooks of the world, the Saquon Barkleys, those guys which kind of make up the second and third tier of guys. I like him a lot, but I just don't think he's going to, when it's all said and done, be the number 1 running back. I know he's had that upside, and could he finish there? Absolutely. But these other guys, I think, are locked and loaded in better offenses. And when push comes to shove especially, I want the guy on the better offense because they're going to be in scoring position more regularly. And that is what you want for fantasy. What were your thoughts when you saw this happen, Jason?
Amazed, just absolutely amazed for me. I've got my top tier of running backs is David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, and Zeke. I do like Zeke. I think he's a top level guy. We saw what he was capable of, but I mean, talent wise, offense wise, this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense to put Zeke ahead of all those guys. So yeah, I agree with you. I thought that was very odd.
Yeah, and I don't want to discredit Ezekiel Elliott, like I said. If push comes to shove, he's in that top tier. But if we're confusing you by talking about tiering instead of rankings, just stick with us. We talk about tiering as being essential to your fantasy rankings, and we'll get to that in future shows. But generally, within a tier, the guys are interchangeable, and that's what allows you to think, oh, well, there's 4 guys left in this tier of running back, for instance, and there's 7 picks before I pick again. Odds are one of these 4 guys might make it back to me, so you're not playing numerically who you want, but as a grouping who you want. And so theoretically, I don't think I would put Ezekiel over those three guys, which is why I have him in his own sub-tier. Yeah. But push comes to shove, I would definitely slide him into that number 1 before I knocked him down to that number 2. So don't come at me, Dallas fans. I like Ezekiel Elliott. I really do. I'm just saying there's question marks around him right now, which are concerning. But you could make the same argument for David Johnson, but we've seen it with David Johnson when he's not hurt. So yeah, that was something that really stood out to me. The number 1 overall pick not being Todd Gurley or Le'Veon Bell, which it has been 99% of the time I've done mock drafts. So that was interesting to me. Jason, what was something that stood out to you?
Well, I remember a couple of years ago we talked a lot about zero RB. Everybody was always talking about zero RB. Oh, just grab a bunch of wide receivers.
Gross. Well, that was really 2 years ago. That was a real fad.
That's why I said a couple of years ago. That'd be 2 years.
Oh, I thought you meant last year. Sorry. My fault. I'm dumb.
No, I said a couple of years ago. That's not a thing, guys. It's not a thing anymore because, good grief, 9 running backs taken in the first round. I mean, come on. I mean, that's 15 in the top 2 rounds. 15 running backs off the board in the top 2 rounds. That is a lot of running backs coming off the board. So basically what we're saying here is pick a running back you like, and definitely, like the tiering system we talk about, this is the way for us to get one of those top-level guys. Because we've seen what's happened over the past several years with guys like Todd Gurley, with guys like David Johnson, with guys like Elliott that have just been point monsters, tons and tons of points. They are starting to figure out, again, in the NFL, that they can run their entire offense through the running back, and that's why you're starting to see all this craziness and the running backs getting back up into into these top tiers. Saquon Barkley was taken number 2 in the NFL draft. That shows you right there just how much importance is being put back on the running back position. So, yeah, you definitely want to, if you are still one of those holdouts that still believes in zero RB, you need to catch up with the times, guys. It's not a thing anymore.
No, the running back position is very, very deep, especially early on. So I understand wanting to zig when everyone else zags and trying to get value out of it, but it doesn't change the fact that this is still a top-heavy position where the top running backs will outperform the top wide receivers. They give you a better floor. They're more volatile, which is why I always leave drafts with more running backs than any other position, because you can stream anything else to me. You can stream quarterbacks. We proved that the last 2 years. If you follow our streaming recommendations, you can finish with the number 1 quarterback in fantasy when it's all said and done if you average out the points week to week. With tight end, it's very streamable based on matchups. Wide receiver, it's streamable based on matchup, and if somebody goes down, there's a couple guys that you can accurately predict that volume is going to go to. With running backs, it's usually that lead guy or nothing. If he goes down, everyone's going to throw waiver priority at the next guy, so unless you stash people at running back, it's really, really hard to kind of get the ball rolling if you don't have a good running back core. So you need to invest early, you need to invest often at running back. So the zero RB thing never really stood out to me. I know everybody got scared off a couple years ago because the running backs had a historically bad year. That was an anomaly. We have not seen it since. We hadn't seen it really before. Nope. And we talked about that at great length back then, how it's an idea that people are doing, but we weren't fans, and it proved to be right by the end of last year. Or 2 years ago even. So, it's just I think some people are going to look at it and think it's crazy because, like you said, 15 running backs in the first 2 rounds? I see that as being the way it should be. So I like what I'm seeing here as far as intelligent drafting. Obviously, for my fantasy drafts, by all means, draft quarterbacks and tight ends and kickers in the first 2 rounds. Push these key guys down back to me. But, for all of our listeners out there, the intelligent people who are prepping, this is what you need to do to me. I mean, obviously, there are top-tier wide receivers that based on your tiering, again, we'll talk about tiering more in depth later on, maybe you draft that wide receiver. I mean, here we had Antonio Brown go number 4. So we had 3 running backs, Antonio Brown, and then another run at running back. Sure, if that's the way you see it, go for it. But make sure your next pick is a running back because you're going to miss out. I guess I'll go to my next point, which is also at running back, and that was, because we've kind of touched on it already, in what world did David Johnson, who we both agree should be a top 3 pick, slip all the way down to the 7th pick in this draft? 6th running back off the board, behind Leonard Fournette, of all people even, who doesn't even catch the ball. That stood out to me. I think it's recency bias, and you'll see that a lot. Players where they'll either be really, really hyped up during a season and they underperform, and then they become these post-hype sleepers, or amazing players that everyone put the world on their shoulders and they got hurt, or they also underperform, so people are scared off. They will shun that player. They'll say, never again, I won't draft that guy, so they slip a little bit. And you know what? you being further in the draft will benefit from these mistakes. David Johnson is uncontestedly going to be the number one running back. We've seen him finish as the number one fantasy running back before. We all think that he has the skill set, the ability, and the opportunity to repeat that if he stays healthy. So why would you take him or pass on him in the early first round? It's just insane to me. So, anything you want to add there? I know it's your running back, and I don't want you to get too heated here, but anything you want to add?
You know what? Anyone that's drafting against me, I think, you definitely want to steer clear of David Johnson. Just steer clear of him.
Yeah.
You don't know. Just steer clear. I'll take him. It's fine. I'll put him on my bet. Guys, come on now. David Johnson had a wrist injury last year.
He was fine.
Okay? A wrist injury. Nothing wrong with his legs. Nothing wrong with his back. Nothing wrong with his head. He's fine. And in 2015, when he was fine, he was the top scorer in fantasy, pretty much, every single week, consistently. It was ridiculous. He basically won me a title. Okay, so go out and get David Johnson early. And if you're in the draft, pray that you're drafting against lunkheads like we were drafting against, that he drops all the way to 7, because then you got if you're in the top half of the draft, you got a shot at it.
Yep. See, people ask us all the time, what's it like having a podcast and still playing fantasy? And it sucks, because things like this, where we want to be like, oh, no, David Johnson's going to suck, because we want him to slip to us, and we want to put that out there in the world.
He's awful.
Yeah, but that's not fair to the listeners. Our job here is to give you guys the best, most accurate information that we can all the time, and that includes our hot takes, who we like, what we're watching, and unfortunately, people listen to the show and use that information against us. But, yeah, we would deserve to lose your listenership if we were shunning David Johnson and saying to stay clear of him. So, quite the opposite is true. Draft David Johnson. I have confidence in him. I know there's offensive line and offensive question marks, but I think that they addressed those problems pretty darn well in the draft. I think that they're loaded up and ready to go, barring crazy slew of injuries. So, that's David Johnson. Your next note, I should say, thing that stood out to you, Jason.
Yeah. I'll say in the top 2 rounds of the draft, and I'll say that Julio Jones dropped out of the first round from last year and was taken as the number 5 overall wide receiver, which is actually right where I had him ranked. So interesting to see that people are cooling on him. Part of that is because of that massive run on running backs, and the fact that DeAndre Hopkins lost his mind this year and had an amazing season. That definitely propelled him over Julio Jones. But it was actually good to see that. I thought that was a decent place for him in the top of the second round.
Yeah. So Julio Jones. We talked about this pretty extensively when we did our rankings. Look, he's finished as the number 6 wide receiver each of the last 2 years. He was given more red zone volume, which is what we were told. He just didn't translate into touchdowns. He actually regressed in the touchdown category. Can he turn that around? With opportunity. That's everything in fantasy football. Opportunity and volume equals production. Is he an elite wide receiver in the NFL? Yes. Are there players with more upside than him in fantasy? Maybe not, but there are players that have a higher floor than him, which is where the debate kind of comes into play. He's a high-volume, high-yardage receiver who doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. That's just who he is right now. So he's going to have a pretty wide discrepancy. I understand the argument that he is a top 3 wide receiver, so he should be drafted as such. I don't have him ranked out that way. We cover this in our ranking show. None of us do. Would any of us be surprised if he finished as the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy? I wouldn't be surprised at all. He has it in him. But for consistency and safety reasons is why we drop him down a couple spots. Like, I think, what was it? I had him at 8 or 9 in my rankings currently. You had him at 6.
Do
you remember?
No, I had him at 5.
You had him at 5? I think I had him at 9. I don't have the rankings in front of me. I should bring up the consensus rankings, but I don't want to divert the show because I don't know what CJ did. Right, but and am I low on him? Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I was going to say, with this guy, I think of this guy, he doesn't have a floor to me. He has a pit, he's got an amazingly high ceiling, but below him is a pit, because if you put him in, there is a chance that he's going to get you nothing. And that's a real problem.
He is the most infuriating player to have on your fantasy teams because he is so inconsistent. And if you've listened to the show or really pay attention to fantasy at all, we talk about this all the time. He has had 1 incredible monster game each of the last 2 seasons, which has propelled him to being a top-tier wide receiver. If you take that game away, in 2016, he finished as a wide receiver 2, and if you just gave him an average production on that day. And I think last year he finished...
Wasn't it 3?
I don't think it was a 3. I think it was a mid-range wide receiver 2. And then last year, I think that if you took that big game out and gave him his average throughout the season, instead he finished as a low-end 1 or a high 2. I'd have to look up my math on that. But I know that's kind of the range he finished in. And yet this is a guy that people get heated about when you don't have him in your top 3. But that's the argument, and that's why I wasn't surprised to see him slip to the second round as the 5th wide receiver off the board. That does not surprise me. Could I see a world where he goes later? Absolutely. Will we most likely, come draft season, see him go higher than this? Most likely as well. So it's just one of those things to watch. And obviously, if you're in best ball leagues, he's a guy you're going to take because he has that massive ceiling. But, for snake drafts, redraft leagues, it's going to fluctuate based on what you need, what you're looking at, and what your thoughts are on him. And that offense taking a step this year. Let's move on, though. Something that definitely stood out to me was that, and I know this is partly my draft philosophy, that this irks me, and I can't comprehend it at all because it's such a streamable and interchangeable position. But how, in what world, were there 9 quarterbacks taken in the first 6 rounds? I understand that people will draft quarterbacks higher than me, but if you look at any circle of experts drafting, you'll only probably see maybe 3 or maybe 4 quarterbacks usually go in the first 5 to 6 rounds. But to see 9 go, not just that, backup quarterbacks are being taken as early as the 9th round. What is happening there? And then beyond that, in a draft, in fantasy football, in a standard snake redraft league, there were 22 quarterbacks taken in one draft. Almost everyone took a backup. Why? Why would you waste that draft capital at a position that's so streamable? The quarterback position is the deepest it has ever been. I can't remember a year it's ever even been close to being as deep as it is this year. It is so streamable looking at it right now in May. This just blew my mind and also excited me because there was so much talent that was pushed further down to me, which is why I think my roster is ridiculously good. So if people want to draft this way, again, by all means, do it if you're in drafts with me. I will snipe, all the value that you push down to me, and I'll just stream the position as I always do anyway. What was your thought on this, Jason?
I was just thinking recently about the talent pool in the quarterback position because there's been years where it's like there's like 3 quarterbacks you really want and everybody else is
then it's like, oh, God, no.
Right. Oh, I don't want that guy, But nowadays, the quarterback position has become so packed with talent. I mean, you look at the guys that just came in. You had 5 guys come off the board in the first round of the NFL draft just this year. All 5 of those guys could possibly start, this year. And those are all talented guys in different ways. And you're talking about guys that have been here for a while. You're talking about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Kirk Cousins. These are all guys that are fantasy darlings. Carson Wentz was a top quarterback last year. Jared Goff, Andrew Luck if he's healthy. Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers didn't go until, the 9th round? 10th round? Something like that? Matt Ryan, I got him in the 10th round. Derek Carr went in the 11th round. Jameis Winston went in the 12th round. I mean, you have an opportunity to pick up a good quarterback. And I got news for you. And people are going to scoff for a while until the first game. But Sam Bradford did not even get drafted. And this is one of the best throwers in the league. And he's on one of the better offenses in the league this year.
Yeah, he was one of those guys that I might stream right in even in week 1 because I drafted based on my gut and what was available to me. But end of the day, I'll play matchups. I drafted Eli Manning. Do I want Eli? Is he going to be my season-long quarterback? Hell no. Does he have a lot of weapons?
Not at all.
And I think obviously he's a post-hype sleeper. Last year we were all really high on him with all of his weapons. Now he's got a running game. They've upgraded all around him. They've upgraded the offensive line. Could he be good to have a couple number 1 performances? Absolutely. Is Sam Bradford one of the best quarterbacks in the league for accuracy when he's healthy? Yes, he is. And he's a guy that wasn't drafted, and there are 22 quarterbacks taken. This is why it's so easy to stream matchups. I will drop these guys left and right, play the matchups, and I'd say 80% of the time it works out very much in your favor. So it's doable. But yeah, like you said, Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, perennial top quarterbacks taken as far back as double-digit rounds. What? So it's
nuts.
It's nuts how deep the position is. That's the crazy thing. So yeah,
and that's probably why you're seeing. That's probably why you're seeing 2 quarterbacks taken, because it's a talent thing. They're looking at their board and they're going, "Holy crap! Derek Carr's available." It's the 11th round. I'm gonna grab it.
Yeah, literally when I was thinking, I don't think I said it during the show, but when a backup quarterback was taken in the 9th round, I quickly looked. I was like, wait, is this a 2-quarterback league? What's happening? Because then there was a big run at the end of the next round. Well, through the entire 10th round, there's a lot of quarterbacks taken, and obviously beyond that. So that was crazy
who was
to me.
Taken in the 9th is what got to me too. Was Andrew Luck.
That was interesting.
Not good, guys. The guy's still injured. We don't even know if he's going to play this year.
Well, it's hard to argue.
Well,
he
is a backup, though. He is a backup. So, I mean, Kirk Cousins is going to play, sure. And if Andrew Luck does play, this guy could have gotten the top quarterback in the league, in the 9th round. So, by one token, you're like, what are you doing? And on the other token, you're like, that could have been a great pick. We're going to find out later.
Yep. And, of course, we're saying that the number one is his upside because we've seen him do it. And the reference of Kirk Cousins and Andrew Luck, the team that drafted Andrew Luck also drafted Kirk Cousins, just to make sure you guys are following, because we know you don't see it in front of you. So we just want to be transparent. Jason, what's something that stood out to you?
Well, I'm going to stick with the quarterbacks.
All right.
Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson both drafted before Tom Brady. I thought that was a little nuts, and Deshaun Watson specifically went in the 3rd round. Guys, wow, really? I mean, that is not good.
I kid you not. I have seen rankings and mock drafts where Deshaun Watson is taken as the number 1 quarterback over Aaron Rodgers.
Oh,
I've seen Deshaun Watson go as early as the 2nd round. It's such a small sample size. Yes, he was amazing, but it was such a small sample size that he did it in. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a very small sample size. And by the way, sophomore slump is a thing, guys.
Yep.
Sophomore slump is a thing. It happens. And it may not happen to Deshaun Watson. I mean, if CJ was here, he'd be crowing right now about how great Deshaun Watson is and how he's going to have a fantastic year. And he's got a great wide receiver and DeAndre Hopkins to throw to, So, yes, it's possible that Deshaun does not take a step back. However, defenses, these are professional defenses that break down game film. They watch Deshaun Watson for most of the season that he played in. They're going to be ready this time for him. And we're going to see a repeat of Dak Prescott. He's not going to be the absolute phenom that he was last year.
I agree. And
that's what I think.
He lit the league on fire. There's no denying that. But we've all seen these top quarterbacks that have gone on these runs that you're like, oh my God, it's godlike performance. Nobody will ever touch this performance. And then they fall back to earth. And then it's much more normal for, better matchups that they or in the quarterback's case, worse matchups that they have. Defenses, as you pointed out, have a chance to scheme and analyze and prepare, whatever the case may be. So, and of course, if you go back and you break down the Texans film and a lot of the interviews and a lot of stuff they were saying last year, they came out with a lot of trick plays, explosive stuff that was really different than what they did last year. And if you watch the tape as the season went on, yes, they lost to Deshaun Watson, but as a whole, that offense started getting more and more stagnant as defenses were catching more and more onto what they were doing. So there's a lot of gray area there, which is why I will not be taking the risk at Deshaun Watson as the 2nd quarterback off the board as a 3rd-round pick. I mean, I wouldn't draft a quarterback that early anyway, if you know me at all. But I see what's so enticing about it. I see the upside, but I just don't think when it's all said and done that's what's going to happen. Could it? Yes. Will it? I lean probably not. I think he'll probably be a lower-end quarterback 1 if we see him kind of come back and be who he was with a much more sustainable production ratio over the course of a season. So we'll see.
Absolutely.
Anything else for that point you wanted to talk about before we move on?
Well, I mentioned Russell Wilson, and we've talked about the Seahawks several times already on this podcast. And I got to tell you guys, look, Russell Wilson's amazing. He is Superman. Okay, I get it, but that team is not in a good place right now. Their defense is a wreck. Their offense, we have no idea how good they're going to be. They just drafted a guy in the first round that was not a first-round running back. They did nothing with the offensive line. This team is going to have problems, and Russell Wilson is going to have to do everything himself. This is a very risky pick in the fourth round at Russell Wilson. And that's I think, the point I'm trying to get to here with these quarterbacks, taking these quarterbacks high. When you draft in the first 3 rounds, and you've heard Griffin say this many times, you draft for floor. You draft for sure things. You draft for a guy that you know is going to give you decent performances. You don't draft for upside. You don't draft for, hopefully this guy will be great, just like he was last year. You draft someone that's been consistent. And in this situation, people are drafting these guys really high because they've seen it. They're like, oh, man, just imagine the possibilities. Don't do it in the top 3 rounds. Wait. You're going to get a chance at these guys.
Yeah, I agree. And I understand that Russell Wilson is perennially a top running back. I mean, and I know last year, if you play in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues.
For quarterback.
For quarterback, yeah. He finished as the number 1 quarterback. I get that, and you want to roll with that into the next season. I get all of that. But another thing that we pointed out extensively, this team has gotten worse this offseason. Russell Wilson had almost no offensive line. He has been running for his life. For years now, he was banged up a lot last year, and it's only a matter of time before it all catches up to him, which is the scary thing. Now, if you want to gamble with it and you want to go grab him in the 4th round as the 3rd quarterback off the board, more power to you. I will not be doing it. So I chase the points, I guess. Do what you're going to do. As I keep saying, I will be probably streaming with later quarterbacks. Something else that got me kind of heated, if you know my draft strategy at all, and it forced me to move on tight end earlier than I wanted to. There were 11 tight ends taken in the first 8 rounds. Why were there so many tight ends taken? By round 8, I feel like typically you see maybe 5. You usually see like the Gronks, the Kelseys. You saw like the Greg Olsons of the world, Jimmy Graham, maybe Delaney Walker. Those are normally the names you would see go earlier. Jordan Reed, when he was healthy, maybe 6. But to see 11 tight ends taken in that range, including players like Tyler Eifert, who has missed more games than he's played in his career, I couldn't fathom it, and it forced me to pull the trigger on tight end earlier than I would like to. I still made it to double digits. I grabbed Trey Burton, who I really, really like.
I was going to say, earlier than he wants to means number 10, guys.
I know.
Took a tight end.
But where I pulled the trigger on is besides the point. What happened in this draft was crazy to me. And people taking backup tight ends, a lot of them taking backups. There were 16 taken during the draft as a whole. I was just watching this happen like, why is this happening? So, again, pushing great value down to me. Everybody keep drafting these early quarterbacks, early tight ends, these streamable positions, and I will keep stacking up at key running backs and key wide receivers and just piling into my depth chart. But, okay, I'll throw this to you, Jason, because you are much more of the standard mindset of you draft the best player available, you see a tight end out there you liked. I mean, you pulled the trigger on Gronk, which I think is one of your points, so I don't want to jump ahead of you. But, Gronk in the 3rd was great. I understand that. That's great value for Gronk, a guy who's been, in years past, pretty consistently a number 1, number 2 first, second-round pick, that is. Beyond that, most of these guys are usually like 5th, 6th, 7th round picks. And then here we have 11 in the top 8, which is crazy to me. So what was your thoughts on this run?
Well, I'll tell you. You mentioned my thing, so since we're talking tight ends, I'll just go ahead and say it. My next thing was that Gronkowski actually slipped down to the 3rd round, and then Kelsey was drafted right after him.
Those later.
Right. Those are the top 2 guys. Everybody knows it. Those are the top 2 tight ends in the league. Now, here's what I'll say about this. First off, the tight end position sucks. Okay, we've said it many, many times. They suck. I'm sorry. They're just awful. You look at it and you're like, oh God, this is bad. This is so horrible. And that's part of the issue, because these top guys, these guys like a Greg Olson, a Kyle Rudolph, and Evan Ingram, who had a great year last year, you want to get these guys before they're gone, because otherwise, you're going to be stuck with Jordan Reed, who's not going to play more than 1 or 2 games. You're going to be stuck with Jack Doyle, who's not that great. You're going to be stuck with an Eric Ebron, who's just awful.
Don't you talk bad about Eric Ebron.
I will talk bad about Eric Ebron. Somehow slipped into the draft in the very, very, very
final pick. He did
Eric Ebron. I can't even understand.
We did it, America. Anyway. We got Eric Ebron drafted.
Good God. Anyway, I wrote an article that, of course, Griffin didn't post because, he's a slacker.
Tried.
About the tight end position. It's all right. About the tight end position. And what I said was I'm seeing a renaissance of the tight end position going forward. There's a lot of very, very athletic and talented tight ends coming out of drafts. Okay, just this year we had Gesicki, we had Hayden Hurst, we had Mark Andrews coming out of there. These guys are all very talented guys that are going to get an opportunity. Last year we had O.J. Howard, who could be one of the best tight ends in the league in a year or two. So I have a feeling that this position, the tight end position, is going to undergo a renaissance and start becoming more prevalent in offenses. And you've seen a lot of offensive coordinators come in who love to use their tight ends. We've been talking about it quite a bit throughout this offseason, and almost every new offensive coordinator and every new quarterback were like, they really like to feature their tight end. So I understand the run. I understand why everybody was like, let me grab a good tight end because what's behind them is crap. I don't want to end up with crap in this position and then be crying all season about my horrible tight end. I understand. I still think it was way too early. I don't understand taking Greg Olsen in the 5th round. He's great. Don't get me wrong. He's one of my favorites. But you could probably wait on him a little bit. He's been injured. He's still old. He's getting old, rather. So I'd be a little less apt to take him. I don't understand Hunter Henry in the 6th round because, again, it's a little bit muddled still. Hopefully he's the guy. I really like him.
Oh, he's the guy.
As you mentioned, Tyler Eifert. I mean, come on, dude. Seriously, the guy is made of straw.
I think it's funny that the guy who drafted Tyler Eifert was one of the only teams that didn't draft a backup. That's hilarious to me. Good call. He's a gunslinger. Whoever was drafting at spot number 5, that guy. So for me, it's just one of these crazy things, so for the last couple of years, we've talked during the offseason, like, oh man, I think this is the year the tight end position's going to have a resurgence. I think they're going to come back to fantasy relevance, and then it keeps being, just besides the top guys, absolute crap. And I'm feeling that way again this year. I think this is a really top-heavy group, and I think there's a lot of talent at the tight end position, and it's all there, theoretically. But will it all play out? Only time will tell. So I understand wanting to pull the trigger on one of these top guys, especially when you see the runs happen, but I'm going to stream the position. I'm going to get the value at guys who are consistently getting me higher floors than these tight ends are getting anyway. We talked about how when we do boom bust, the guys who, the boom bust players of the week, when we do week-to-week shows during the season, for a tight end not to be a bust is a much lower threshold than any other position because we were just like, come on, just get like 5 points. When everyone else we say you have to get at least 7 or 8.
Man. Give me 5 points. I'm happy.
Exactly. So I'll get myself, all these guys are getting these tight ends early where I was able to grab myself my 3rd and 4th running back in my depth charts. I was able to get backup wide receivers as well. Marvin Jones, Sterling Shepard, these guys that at a time when people are burning priority on guys like Tyler Eifert and Jordan Reed and Delaney Walker, either ancient guys or guys who are very injury prone. So I don't know. It's just something that was. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's something else I thought that I just realized looking at the board here. Eric Ebron was drafted last. George Kittle was drafted 2 spots before him.
Yep.
O.J. Howard was drafted in the last round. You know who wasn't drafted?
Cameron
Brate.
Yep.
Not drafted.
Definitely streamable guy. I like Cameron Brate. I think he's going to still be the pass-catching tight end there, but it's a murky situation. Unlike Hunter Henry, which has clarity with Antonio Gates being gone, O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate, it's muddled. But then again, Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle were drafted, and they're both on a muddled back committee, so who knows. Yep. That was my tight end rant. Did you have another point you wanted to make, Jason? Sorry to kind of sidetrack the show.
I made it in the middle of your point there, the Gronkowski flipping the 3rd. That was, yeah.
All right, so we actually kind of already mentioned this, so I'll say Aaron Rodgers, he was almost a 2nd-round pick. He was the first quarterback taken as the first pick in the 3rd round. That's no surprise. He's generally a 3rd-round pick, even coming off injury. We all know the talent that is Aaron Rodgers, so we'll move on because we kind of touched on that. Something that was very interesting to me, Dez Bryant was drafted, but I think smartly. He was drafted in the 15th round. So,
good choice.
Yeah, I mean, why not take the shot at a guy who could be a serious, number 2 flex, waiver wire streaming type guy for you, depending on where he lands in a situation. He definitely has the upside, so why not take that shot? Your 15th round pick is generally a flyer anyway. He's the guy you're probably going to end up dropping for some streamer or something off the waiver wire anyway after week 1, or even maybe before week 1. So why not take that shot? I liked that draft pick, and when it happened, I was like, oh, I should have done that. So good on you, team number 6.
Nice work.
Anything else stood out to you, Jason?
Yeah. Talking about the top-heavy running backs in this draft, I mean, like we said, there was, 15 taken in the first 2 rounds?
Yep.
That's crazy, The great thing about that, though, is there's a lot of really good talent in the middle of the draft, right in those mid-rounds. In the 6th round, and I'm not going to mention every single one, but in the 6th round, Sammy Watkins, Pierre Garçon, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Marvin Jones were all drafted. 7th round, you had Cooper Kupp and Emmanuel Sanders. 8th round, Sterling Shepard, Robert Woods, and Devin Funchess. 9th round, you had Will Fuller and Devontae Parker. Montavis Bryant dropped all the way to the 10th round. So you don't have to freak out in the top of the draft looking for wide receivers, because in the middle round, if you're smart and if you're able to look at good offenses, I mean, come on, Cooper Kupp is on a very good offense. Robert Woods on a very good offense. These are all guys. So Juju Smith-Schuster, very good offense.
Yeah.
So these are all guys that you could draft and get some really nice value for in those mid rounds. I think Martavis Bryant in the 10th round is a steal.
I mean, a very, very murky situation, but yeah, I agree. It's one of those things where if I had to lean, and we get this question all the time, what's your draft strategy? And we always say be fluid, but if I had to pick one, I would go 0 wide receiver, because to me there is obviously a serious amount of elite running backs. If you get your hands on 2 of those early, you are looking really good for the season. But the wide receiver position is so deep in the middle rounds. There's so many wide receiver 2s for fantasy there that you can get and stream and just load your bench up with these guys who at any given week have that wide receiver 1 upside, and at worst probably a flex-worthy floor. So you can just get this consistency at wide receiver in the middle rounds. I like it a lot, and for all those names you pointed out, plus plenty of other ones. So yeah, it's a very valid point. There's a lot of good wide receivers. We're getting a little bit long here, so this will be, I guess, my last point. Something that stood out to me, we talk about these discrepancies between players in the same committee, but one thing that really intrigued me, and we could go on and on about the splits between Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, Marshawn Lynch, and Doug Martin, but one that was really intriguing to me because we haven't really seen how it plays out yet. We have Kenyon Drake drafted in the 4th. And then Frank Gore all the way in the 13th round. When I kind of believe that Frank Gore, I hope he's just a red zone, change of pace guy who's going to come in and relieve Kenyon Drake. But bottom line, they're paying Frank Gore a decent chunk of change, and he has been historically a first, second down back. Kenyon Drake can be that third down back. I don't know how this offense is going to play out, and see these guys being drafted so far apart from each other, because all the other ones were within a couple rounds of each other. Your Devontae Freemans and your Tevin Coleman's even, all very closely, a couple rounds separating them. These guys opposite ends of the draft. So I guess my question to you, Jason, do you burn the draft capital on Kenyon Drake, a guy who, in fantasy circles and here on the show, we all loved and we're really hoping that they wouldn't bring someone in to compete with him? Or do you go with a super late value in Frank Gore and just have that draft capital early on for another position? Which way do you lean in this exchange, knowing what we know now on the 18th of May?
I would wait till the 13th round and take Frank Gore.
I agree.
I mean, this is a guy that, that's what you did. This is a guy you drafted.
I did draft him. I'm the one that drafted him. That's true.
Exactly. Look, this is a guy that has always surprised everybody. Everybody always said, you guys always have been saying, because I'm a big Frank Gore fan on the show, you guys every year say, when's the bottom going to drop out? When is the bottom going to drop out of Frank Gore, and he's not going to be good anymore, he's getting older, no. But every year he is consistent. He always gets good production. Now, he's a new face in a new place. That's the one thing that you need to concern yourself with here. And that's why I think it's smart that he drops all the way down to the 13th round. Okay? Smart. I like Kenyon Drake, but Kenyon Drake is not going to be able to beat out Frank Gore unless Frank Gore gets injured, in my opinion. So I like Frank Gore in the 13th round if I had to pick between those two.
At this point in the careers, I don't know if that's what it comes down to. I think it's just going to come down to play calling and style of runner. But I mean, I know Frank Gore is a new face, a new place, and we are always very wary of that. But being a player like Frank Gore, that doesn't scare me as much. He's such a veteran in this league. He's so consistent, and he's a north-south runner and a goal line back. You just get the ball, you hit the gap. So it's really hard to mess that up. So I don't know. It's something that really kind of intrigued me, that discrepancy right there. And, we could go on and on about a lot of other these discrepancies between, like I said, these committees, but that was just one of the widest separations of players, so I thought it was noteworthy. Anything else you want to add before we wrap this recap up, Jason?
No. I think we pretty much covered all the majors. Oh, I was going to talk about rookies. That's right. So, yeah, I do like what I saw from the drafting of rookies. In fact, I think I took the very first rookie in Saquon Barkley.
And we'll deep dive on the rookies as I recap on a Patreon show. So patreon.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics if you want to know more about our takes on these guys, but because we got to wrap up soon. But sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. Lots of good rookies taken in this draft, especially rookie running backs. When you had a rookie, you had 2 rookie running backs.
I did.
Darius Geisen and Kerryon Johnson. I actually had 3: Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, and Ronald Jones. So these are value picks, guys. If you know these guys are going to be the number 1 runner like Saquon Barkley, or are going to challenge for that position, which is Nick Chubb and Ronald Jones, and I took them late 9th and 11th round consecutively.
Yeah,
that's a good move. That is a good move, because if they do, and those were my 4th and 5th running backs off the board for me. So those are upside picks. They could come in and be the guy and give you running back 1 numbers week to week. So that's very good to keep an eye on.
They'll have the volume on the floor, and that's one of those things that if you play in a casual league or a league of people, you always have those guys in your league that they're know-it-alls. But they think they're know-it-alls. They actually don't know anything because they don't do the research. We all know that guy in our league, or in most cases, a number of guys in our leagues. These guys will slip because generally fantasy players, they'll stick to the names that they know, the ones that finished high last season. They don't know where to insert these guys unless it's someone who's being widely talked about, like Saquon Barkley. Most of these guys will probably slip down your drafts, and you can get some serious value. Like I already expect, and this is kind of me peeling back the curtain a little bit, I think kind of with what I talked about before, I'm going to be looking at running back early, wide receiver in the middle ranks, and then a lot of these rookie running backs to round out my running back core as we get later into the middle rounds and into the double-digit rounds before I draft my quarterback, tight end, kicker, defense. So, and I think that my team is going to look disgusting with that draft strategy. I'm super hyped about it. I've done a couple of other mock drafts where I did that exact strategy, which is, again, we always say be fluid, but that was the way I was leaning. I was trying it out, and I loved my team. So these guys will slip. That's all I'm saying. And you can get amazing value, like Jason said, in the mid to late rounds. Guys who are going to be starters on their teams, at least first, second down backs, and that's going to get you a serious floor with, as he mentioned, number 1 upside, depending if they break big plays or if they get just the vast majority of the carries. But we got to get out of here. So I guess with that, that'll do it for us today. Please make sure you guys tune in on Tuesday. We'll be back with a new show, maybe with CJ. Maybe. We'll see. And we'll see how it all plays out. We never know. CJ is kind of a phantom of sorts. So, I guess that will do it for us today. Make sure you guys subscribe wherever you're listening. Give us a rating. Give us a review. It helps out the show a lot. If there's anything that stood out to you guys, if you listen to Tuesday's show, comment down below. Or if you agree or disagree with our takes, let us know. Start a conversation. We love interacting with you guys. Please make sure you guys just let us know your thoughts. And with that, Jason, any parting thoughts?
Guys, if you're new to listening to the show, definitely leave a comment. Let us know you're new and welcome to the show. Hope you're enjoying yourselves, and stick with us. As Griffin likes to say, we are a year-round podcast. Yes, we're going to be doing this nonstop. There's going to be lots of good content coming out. Good. Yes, welcome to our dysfunctional family. So, all right, we're out of here. Everyone, take care. Have a great weekend. We will see you on Tuesday. Bye.